Okay, everybody. So we're going to get into. This is a letter. This is a very important part of American history. This is Karl Marx's letter to Abraham Lincoln. This was this was presented to U.S. Ambassador Charles Francis Adams, who was from the Adams family or descends from the Adams family. It's And it was his letter to Abraham Lincoln at the end of the Civil War. This is 1865. So let's go ahead and get into this. This is Marx. Sir, we congratulate the American people upon your re-election by a large majority. If resistance to the slave power was the reserved watchword of your first election, the triumphant war cry of your re-election is death to slavery. From the commencement of the Titanic American strife, the working men of Europe felt instinctively that the Star-Spangled Banner carried the destiny of their class. The contest for the territories which opened the dire epoche was it not to decide whether the virgin soul of immense tracts should be wedded to the labor of the immigrant or prostituted by the tramp of the slave driver. When an oligarchy of 300,000 slaveholders dared to inscribe for the first time in the annals of the world, quote, slavery on the banner of armed revolt, when on the very spots where hardly a century ago the idea of one great democratic republic had first sprung up, whence the first declaration of the rights of man was issued, and the first impulse given to the European Revolution of the 18th century. When on those very spots, counter-revolution, with systematic thoroughness, gloried in rescinding, quote, the ideas entertained at the time of the formation of the old Constitution, end quote, and maintained slavery to be, quote, a beneficent institution, end quote. Indeed, the old solution of the great problem of the relation of capital to labor, and cynically proclaimed property in man the cornerstone of the new edifice. Then the working classes of Europe understood at once, even before the fanatic partisanship of the upper classes for the Confederate gentry had given its dismal warning, that the slaveholders' rebellion was to sound the tocsin for a general holy crusade of property against labor, and that for the men of labor, with their hopes for the future, even their past conquests were at stake in that tremendous conflict on the other side of the Atlantic. Everywhere they bore, therefore, patiently the hardships imposed upon them by the cotton crisis, opposed enthusiastically the pro-slavery intervention of their betters, and from most parts of Europe contributed their quota of blood to the good cause. While the workingmen, the true political powers of the North, allowed slavery to defile their own republic, while before the black person, mastered and sold without his concurrence, they boasted it the highest prerogative of the white-skinned laborer to sell himself and choose his own master. They were unable to attain the true freedom of labor, or to support their European brethren in their struggle for emancipation. But this barrier to progress has been swept off by the Red Sea of civil war. The working men of Europe feel sure that, as the American War of Independence initiated a new era of ascendancy for the middle class, so the American anti-slavery war will do for the working classes. They consider it an earnest of the epoch to come, that it fell to the lot of Abraham Lincoln, the single-minded son of the working class, to lead his country through the matchless struggle for the rescue of an enchained race and the reconstruction of a social world. Signed on behalf of the International Workingmen's, the Central Council. Okay, and so he gave this to the ambassador in England. And so here was the ambassador's reply, which came the 28th of January in 1865, signed off by the legislation of the United States. Ambassador Adams replies, Sir, I am directed to inform you that the address of the Central Council of your association, which was duly transmitted through this legation to the President of the United States, has been received by him. So far as the sentiments expressed by it are personal, they are accepted by him with a sincere and anxious desire that he may be able to prove himself not unworthy of the confidence which has been recently extended to him by his fellow citizens, and by so many of the friends of humanity and progress throughout the world. The government of the United States has a clear consciousness that its policy neither is nor could be reactionary, but at the same time, it adheres to the course which it adopted at the beginning, of abstaining everywhere from propagandism and unlawful intervention. It strives to do equal and exact justice to all states and to all men, and it relies upon the beneficial results of that effort for support at home and for respect and goodwill throughout the world. Nations do not exist for themselves alone, but to promote the welfare and happiness of mankind by benevolent intercourse and example. It is in this relation that the United States regard their cause in the present conflict with slavery, maintaining insurgents as the cause of human nature. And they derive new encouragements to persevere from the testimony of the working men of Europe, that the national attitude is favored with their enlightened approval and earnest sympathies. I have the honor to be, sir, your obedient servant, Charles Francis Adams. Okay, well, yeah, thank y'all for tuning in. So there was Marx's exchange of letters with Abraham Lincoln through the ambassador. So yeah, thank y'all for a lot of people don't understand that Marx is an extremely important part of American history, because Marx was signed on as the English correspondent in the New York Tribune. And the New York Tribune was the most distributed paper throughout the United States during the time of the Civil War and up until the Civil War. And Marx was constantly writing against slavery and what slavery was. And it reached the ears of the abolitionists and the Union sympathizers, and it also was distributed among whatever military could read. And so he played in a very important part of the Civil War in the United States, and we don't get told that in the United States. And it's such a shame that we can't understand, how we are, where we are in the world, and how we are connected to it, and what timeline is, and what Marx was saying. Because Marx is an important part of American history, a very important part. So as a matter of fact, not only were generals regularly reading Marx, but the person who hired Karl Marx onto the New York Tribune was a socialist, and he also served on Abraham Lincoln's cabinet and advised him on his generals. A lot of people do not know that. It is certainly, every American should learn what role this played in our history, because this is our history. Well, thank y'all for tuning in. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr, and Medium. All of this Marxist saw. Y'all can hit me up there. Y'all have a great day. Dodada goy.